She doesn't need to announce herself when she walks into a room because her energy arrives first, carrying something ancient and unnameable, something that stills the air and makes people sit a little straighter without knowing why. Before we dive into 5 habits that make a spiritually awakened woman mysterious, make sure to subscribe for more videos like this. The spiritually awakened woman is not loud, not grand, not trying to captivate, and yet she does. There is a quiet power in the way she simply exists, as if she holds a secret no one else has earned. Her presence unsettles those who hide from themselves and soothes those who are learning to meet their own depth. She moves with the kind of certainty that only comes from walking through fire and learning to bless the ashes. She is not here to perform or entertain or impress. She is here to embody. And that embodiment is what disorients people the most. Because most are used to masks, to noise, to women who speak in apologies and shrink around their softness. But she is not here to be palatable. She is here to be true. And that truth is neither aggressive nor passive. It is rooted. It is full. It is whole. She does not try to be mysterious. She simply no longer translates herself into something easily consumable. The woman who has touched the deepest parts of herself does not need approval. She no longer craves permission. Her mystery is not artifice, it is self-possession. And in a world that rewards conformity and punishes stillness, her calm becomes a provocation. People project onto her because she holds a mirror without saying a word. Her eyes see through performance. Her silence invites truth. Her smile is not currency, it is offering, and it is only given where it is honored. There is something about her that feels like a memory you can't place, like a song you've only ever heard in a dream. She holds her story like sacred text, not needing to quote it for validation. Her mystery is born from meeting the places in herself that others avoid: the grief, the rage, the longing, the silence, and emerging from them not unscarred, but unafraid. She has learned that not everything beautiful must be explained, and not every wound must be shown to be believed. She trusts her intuition more than she trusts the noise of the world. She has chosen depth over distraction. And while others cling to labels, she simply lives. Her rhythms confuse those who crave predictability. Her boundaries disorient those who seek access without reverence. But for those who are ready to meet themselves, she is magnetic. Not because she tries to be, but because she reminds them of something they forgot: that it is possible to be whole without being hardened, to be deep without being dramatic, to be wise without needing to prove it. Her mystery is a reflection of her integration. She has made peace with not being understood by everyone. She has stopped translating her soul into simple language. She no longer fears being alone because she has made a sanctuary of her solitude. And those who encounter her cannot forget her, not because she demanded attention, but because her presence reached something beneath their surface. She is the kind of woman who doesn't raise her voice, but who silences the room, not with dominance but with presence, not with control, but with stillness. She is a reminder that the sacred doesn't need to shout to be heard, it only needs to be felt, and she is felt long after she is gone. Carl Jung once wrote that the mystic is not a person lost in fantasy, but one who has touched the depths of reality too profound for the average mind to comprehend. The spiritually awakened woman, through the lens of Jung, is not mysterious because she is hidden, but because she is integrated. She does not run from her shadow or deny her light. She has sat in the ruins of her own illusions and sifted through the rubble until she could name what was hers and what was inherited. Her mystery is not a mask or a performance, but the consequence of wholeness in a world that rewards fragmentation. Jung's idea of individuation, the process of becoming who one truly is by uniting the conscious and unconscious self, lives in her. She has peeled back the layers of performance, survival patterns, and people-pleasing until only truth remained, even when that truth was uncomfortable. She has made contact with the archetypal forces within her, the wild woman, the mother, the lover, the sage, and she does not reject any of them. Her mysticism does not come from ritual alone, but from her capacity to dwell in paradox. She can grieve and rejoice in the same breath. She can weep without crumbling. She can be soft without submission and strong without domination. She has tasted darkness and did not run. She has touched the divine, not in some mountaintop moment of perfection, but in the middle of heartbreak, in the center of her silence, in the places where others numb. This is why people sense something unplaceable in her presence. It is not that she is elusive, but that she is whole. Most people only offer the parts of themselves they believe are lovable. She offers her entire self-flawed, scarred, holy, and in doing so, she disturbs the performance of perfection around her. She is magnetic not because she chases attention, but because she does not require it. Her gaze is both tender and ancient, as though it has seen the beginning and the end, and still chooses to sit in the middle with grace. She listens not to fix, but to witness. She speaks not to impress, but to connect. Her words are careful, not because she is afraid of being wrong, but because she understands the weight they carry. The mystic in her does not need to be loud, because she is fluent in silence. She can sit beside another in their darkness without trying to drag them toward the light. She knows the light will come when it is ready. Her inner world is rich, not because she escaped into it, but because she made peace with it. She has walked through her own underworld and met her demons with eyes wide open. And in doing so, she has become someone who no longer fears the depths of others. That is what makes her mysterious. Not her clothes, not her demeanor, not some curated aesthetic of spirituality, but her intimacy with her own psyche. She does not flinch at truth. She does not fear stillness. She is the mystic not because she claims to be, but because she lives as one, and her presence reminds those around her of their own forgotten depth. She is the mirror, the map, the myth made real. And though she asks for nothing, her very being changes everything. They try to define her the way a child tries to catch wind in a jar, convinced that if they just name her the right thing, they'll understand her, master her, pin her in place like a butterfly beneath glass. But she is not a specimen. She is not a template. She is not a collection of traits easily mapped or a role waiting to be cast. Her presence defies archetypes because she is not performing mystery, she is living truth, and truth in its purest form is not easily categorized. They call her a witch because she is tuned to energies they've never bothered to feel. They call her a muse because they do not yet know how to create without first being intoxicated by someone who has. They call her a healer because they feel lighter around her but can't explain why. They call her a threat because her silence mirrors back everything they've avoided inside themselves. And so they reduce her to metaphors because the full scope of who she is cannot be held by language forged in patriarchy, performance, and projection. Her identity is not found in their stories. It was carved in solitude, shaped by grief, refined in fires they never saw her walk through. She does not explain herself to be palatable. She does not contort herself to soothe insecurity. She does not shrink to fit the imagination of people who only know how to love what they can predict. When someone meets her, they either rise to the occasion or retreat, but either way they are changed. Because she refuses to play the game of relatability. She is not concerned with being easy to digest. She has tasted too much silence, too much stillness, too much spiritual labor to ever return to the hunger for approval. And because she no longer needs to be understood to feel worthy, she becomes magnetic to those who are ready to meet her as she is, not as they need her to be. That's the real reason she unnerves people. Not because she is cold, not because she is unreachable, but because her self-possession forces others to confront how little they know of their own. People want her to explain her peace, name her gift, apologize for her discernment, but she does none of those things. She listens, watches, smiles, and lets the discomfort speak for itself. Those who try to define her will fail not because she's elusive, but because she has transcended the need to be pinned down. Her identity is not an outfit she wears, it is a vibration she embodies. And vibrations can't be boxed, they can only be felt. She doesn't tell you who she is, she lets you sense it, and in that sensing, she teaches you something without ever saying a word. That is her mystery, that is her power. That is why people cannot stop thinking about her, even when they pretend to forget. Because once you've touched the frequency of someone who no longer needs your definition to exist, everything else feels like static. Her first habit is one of holy observation. She moves through the world with eyes that do not seek to be met, only to understand, and in that stillness she sees everything. Not the show people put on, not the words they choose to dress their intentions in, but the energy underneath, the tremble in the voice, the nervous laugh. the way someone avoids their own reflection in the glass. She sees the contradiction between tone and truth, gesture and motive, and she does not rush to name it or confront it. She simply sees, and that alone is disarming. People feel her gaze like a tuning fork, not because she stares, but because her presence refuses to be fooled. She catches the micro-shifts, the energetic withdrawal before betrayal, the sudden over-apology of someone carrying hidden guilt, but she never points it out to prove a point. Her intuition is not a weapon. It is a lamp she carries in silence, lighting her path so she does not stumble into illusions. And because she does not need to be seen in order to validate her seeing, her power grows in shadows. She does not compete for the center of the room. She does not speak to fill silence. She does not mistake noise for intimacy. Instead, she listens, lets people reveal themselves, and allows the truth to arrive without force. That discipline creates an energy around her that makes people check their own reflection. They fumble in her presence, not because she is judgmental, but because she is clear. And clarity has a way of making people feel like they are under a spotlight, even when she says nothing at all. She has mastered the art of restraint, and that mastery becomes its own kind of mirror. She sees others so fully that they begin to feel seen by themselves for the first time, and that is both magnetic and terrifying, because to be witnessed without performance is to be naked in a world obsessed with costume. And she offers that kind of gaze with no agenda. She does not see to control, to fix, or to rescue. She sees because she knows that truth is the only soil anything lasting can grow in. She sees because she has spent years learning how to sit with her own contradictions, so she does not flinch when others reveal theirs. And though people may not understand what draws them to her, they will remember the way her silence felt like a question they weren't ready to answer. Her perception becomes a quiet altar where the masks people wear begin to slip, not because she tears them off, but because they suddenly feel too heavy in her presence. She does not need recognition to know what she knows. Her power does not come from being right, it comes from being rooted, and those roots go deep. That is why she is mysterious. That is why people can't stop thinking about her even after brief encounters. Not because she made herself the loudest in the room, but because in a world that begs to be seen, she became the one who sees. She loves like an open sky, not a cage. There is no grasping in her touch, no bargaining in her gaze, no hidden contracts tucked behind her affection. She loves with presence, not pressure. Her tenderness does not demand permanence because she understands that real connection cannot be held in clenched fists. It must be honored in open palms. This sacred detachment she lives by is not coldness but clarity, not apathy but reverence. She knows that love is not proved by how tightly you hold someone but by how freely you allow them to be. That kind of freedom is unsettling to those who confuse closeness with control or who were raised to believe that love must come with sacrifice and submission. But she has tasted the difference. She has been the one who overgave and overstayed and over-explained in the name of being worthy. She has walked through the ruins of one-sided loyalty and come out the other side with something more precious than approval. She came out with herself, and now she will not perform contortion acts to keep someone near. She will not shrink her intuition to avoid rocking someone else's fragile foundation. She will not chase what turns its back or plead with silence to speak. She loves without tying knots around someone's wings. She loves without making herself small in the hope that someone will stay. And that kind of love feels like both invitation and release. People feel it in her presence, the rare ability to offer her whole heart without placing it on a leash. She will sit with you in your joy and in your sorrow. She will see the parts of you you have tried to hide. She will hold space without making your pain her identity, but when it is time to go, she will go. Not in anger, not in dramatics. Just with the same grace she arrived with, because her wholeness is not for rent, because her self-worth does not rise and fall with who chooses to stay. She has untangled love from dependency. She has reclaimed her energy from the places it was once squandered. She does not give to get, she gives to give, and then she releases. That rhythm love, presence, releases the pattern of her mystery. It is the quiet chant of her power. People find themselves returning to the memory of her not because she demanded anything from them, but because she never did. Her absence, somehow, becomes more haunting than her presence, because she took nothing with her when she left. No guilt, no bitterness, only the echo of being seen without condition. Only the soft imprint of someone who gave her love freely and then walked away before it could be twisted. That kind of detachment is not taught in fairy tales, it is learned in the ashes. It is built by those who have finally understood that sacred connection cannot be forced, owned, or controlled. It can only be met, and if it cannot be met, it must be released. She carries that wisdom in her bones. She loves with it in her eyes. And though some may never be able to name what makes her unforgettable, they will always remember the way it felt to be held by someone who never tried to hold them hostage. She loves like an open sky, vast and ungraspable, not because she is incapable of devotion, but because she has seen the difference between holding someone and holding on to them. Her love does not come with invisible chains or silent expectations. It flows from her fully and freely, with no need for repayment or proof. She does not anchor others to her presence out of fear of being left, nor does she decorate herself with need to feel valuable. Instead, she offers presence like water, pure, sustaining, but never demanding to be consumed. Her care is deep, but it is never invasive. Her heart is open, but it does not leak. People feel safe with her not because she tries to bind them, but because she never pretends. She does not orchestrate affection to keep someone close or tailor her truths to fit someone else's comfort. She allows what is real to stay and what is false to fall away. That kind of surrender is foreign to those who believe love must be earned through sacrifice, that closeness must be enforced with effort. But she knows the truth. What is meant for her will feel like breath, not battle. Her detachment is not absence of emotion, but presence of wisdom. She has held the ache of clinging and felt it tear at her soul, and now she no longer mistakes possession for partnership. Her boundaries are not warnings, they are blessings. They say, "You may come close, but you may not come to consume." That confuses those who are used to love being transactional, who only understand intimacy through performance, control, or dependence. They cannot figure out why she does not flinch when they pull away, why she does not chase when they go silent. But she is not silent out of pride. She is silent out of clarity. She does not fear distance because she no longer equates absence with loss. She does not measure her worth by who returns. She has sat with herself in the quiet too many times to believe she can be abandoned. She understands that to release someone is not to stop loving them, but to stop distorting yourself to keep them. Her detachment is sacred because it is rooted in truth, not the kind of truth spoken aloud, but the kind that lives in the bones, the kind that knows love cannot be held by force, and so she lets go. Not because she is careless, but because she is careful with her spirit. She loves with an open palm, not a clenched fist, and when the connection shifts, she does not panic, she does not grasp. She does not spiral, she bows, she blesses, she turns inward. And that ability to love and release is not just rare, it is radiant. People feel her freedom and call it mystery. They feel her peace and call it power, but it is neither performance nor manipulation. It is simply presence that does not fear absence. It is care without control. It is intimacy without intrusion. She is the kind of woman who changes you, not by staying, but by showing you what it feels like to be fully seen and then gently let go. And when you look back, long after she is gone, you will not remember the words she said or the things she did. You will remember the feeling of being loved without being owned. You will remember that rare, sacred freedom that tasted like truth. She doesn't just wake up and check her phone or rush out the door with half a thought and cold coffee. She rises slowly, deliberately, as though the air around her has weight and meaning. Her mornings begin not with frenzy but with devotion, and not to any external god but to the altar of her own breath, her own being. She treats time like a sacred element, not a resource to be wrung dry. Each act she performs carries a pulse of intention, whether it is the way she lights a candle before speaking a difficult truth, or how she lingers in silence after hearing one. She doesn't operate on autopilot. She isn't clocking into existence just to survive another day. Her movement is deliberate, like a dancer who knows that every step speaks. She drinks water like it's a prayer. She reads slowly, listens fully, and touches the earth like she belongs to it, There is a softness in her that isn't laziness, it's reverence. She slows down not because she is behind, but because she is in tune. She walks through the noise of the world without absorbing it, protected not by armor but by ritual. And those rituals are invisible unless you're paying close attention. They are in the way she blesses her space with quiet before anyone enters it, the way she chooses her words with care, the way she places her hand on her heart when truth stirs beneath her skin. Her life does not orbit tasks or productivity metrics. It orbits meaning, and that meaning is not found in dramatic declarations, but in the mundane made holy. Folding laundry becomes a practice of mindfulness. Washing her face becomes a return to self. She does not run from stillness, she drinks from it. While others live in loops of distraction and overstimulation, she returns again and again to center. Her calendar is not filled for the sake of appearances. It is spacious by design, curated with care, grounded in what nourishes her and what does not. She says no to what pulls her off rhythm, even if that no disappoints someone else, and it often does. People cannot always understand why she resists the pace of urgency, why she does not scramble when pressured, why she does not sprint just because someone else is shouting. But she has learned to discern between movement and meaning, between reaction and ritual, and that discernment makes her feel untouchable, otherworldly, like she lives in a dimension the rest of the world forgot. There is no mysticism in how she speaks, yet her presence feels like a spell. People feel calmer in her company without knowing why. They sit straighter, they breathe slower. They stop talking just to hear themselves. Because she is not performing peace, she is embodying it, and that embodiment has a gravitational pull. It reminds others of what they forgot they needed: slowness, depth, the dignity of small sacred acts. She doesn't force them to slow down. She simply becomes the still point around which the room rearranges itself, and they remember, in her presence, that life is not meant to be a blur. It is meant to be lived with awareness, with rhythm, with grace. She does not crave control over time, she collaborates with it. And in doing so, she becomes the woman whose mystery is not in what she hides but in what she honors. A woman who moves like every breath counts because she knows that it does. She does not pour herself out for applause or open her chest for people who only want to peer inside for sport. Her truth is not a transaction, and her vulnerability is not a public performance. There is a gentleness to her withholding, not because she is guarded, but because she is sacred. She has lived through the ache of being misunderstood, the burn of offering her depths to those who only wanted the surface, and now she understands that silence can be a sanctuary. She chooses what to reveal with the same care one might use to place an heirloom on a velvet cloth. She does not fear connection, but she no longer chases it with bleeding hands. When she speaks, it lands like a slow drumbeat, measured and meaningful, not because she is trying to be poetic, but because she respects language too much to waste it. Her silence is not a game, not a punishment, not a cry for attention. It is a filter. It is a space where truth can breathe or where deception can suffocate itself, and that space is not up for negotiation. She does not explain herself to be palatable, nor does she shrink her soul into sound bites just to make someone else comfortable. Her story is not a spectacle. Her pain is not a confession booth for the curious. She knows who deserves her words and who only wants access, and she grants that access with discernment. There is a holiness in how she withholds, an elegance in how she lets the mystery remain. Not to manipulate, not to control, but to protect the energy she once gave away too easily. People lean in, hoping to catch more, hoping to be invited into the chapters she does not post, into the versions of herself she does not perform. But that invitation is not earned through flattery or force. It is earned through stillness, through presence, through being able to sit with her silence without trying to fill it. Those who cannot meet her there will leave thinking she is distant, guarded, hard to read. But those who can will discover something rarely: a woman who does not fear being known but simply knows her worth. A woman who understands that just because someone asks does not mean she has to answer. She does not wound with silence, but she does not betray herself with noise. She will listen, she will witness, she will hold space, but she will not leak. She is a vessel, not a funnel. And in a world where people scream their stories for validation and spill their souls into hands that cannot hold them, she becomes a kind of anchor, a reminder that not everything must be shared to be real. That privacy can be powerful, that the quietest woman in the room might be the one holding the deepest truths. She doesn't flinch when asked invasive questions. She smiles softly and says nothing. Not because she's hiding, but because she is home in herself. And that refusal to explain, to unravel, to be consumed on command, it feels like power. It feels like peace. It feels like a mirror held up to every part of someone that wants to be let in but has not yet earned the right. And that mirror does not flatter. It reflects, it reveals, it reminds. That some doors only open with reverence. That some women are not waiting to be discovered. They are waiting to be met, fully, quietly, or not at all. She does not interrupt silence with noise or crowd uncertainty with premature answers. She waits, she listens, but not only to words, not only to logic. She listens to the invisible, to the subtle shifts in a room, to the weight behind a yes that feels like a no, to the way her chest tightens when something is misaligned. She follows the ache behind her ribs before the evidence ever arrives. Her world is not limited to what the eyes can see or the ears can hear. She moves by symbols, by dreams, by patterns that whisper before they shout. When people ask how she knew, how she sensed something was off, how she arrived at the truth so quietly, she just smiles. Because trying to explain that kind of knowing to someone who hasn't cultivated their own would be like trying to describe music to someone who has never heard a note. It isn't performative mysticism, it's presence. It's a deep spiritual attunement born from solitude, from listening inwardly when the world was too loud, from learning that the body has its own language and the soul has its own map. She honors the moments others dismiss, the dream that lingered, the animal that crossed her path 3 times, the stranger who said something she had written in her journal the day before. These are not coincidences to her, they are breadcrumbs, and she knows how to follow them without demanding a destination. She does not rush clarity. She waits for it to rise in her like morning light through fog. People around her feel it, that quiet certainty, that calm that comes not from control but from communion with something older than intellect. It is unsettling to those who rely on facts alone, and magnetic to those who are beginning to suspect there is more. She speaks less, not because she has less to say, but because she has more to hear. When she does speak, her words carry an echo of something deeper than opinion. They carry the weight of wisdom gathered not just from books or mentors, but from silence, from wounds she transmuted, from sitting with discomfort until it offered its name. Her choices are often ahead of their time. Her no arrives before others see the reason. Her yes is rooted, even if it confuses those who need proof. But she no longer waits for consensus. She trusts her knowing. Not because she thinks she is always right, but because she has learned that the soul rarely speaks in urgency or fear. It speaks in nudges, in longings, in soft discomforts that grow louder when ignored. And she listens. That listening makes her mysterious. People feel seen by her in ways they cannot explain. They feel exposed without being judged, safe without being coddled. Because she hears the part of them they forgot how to articulate. Her intuition is not decoration, it is devotion. A devotion to living in harmony with something sacred, something beyond the visible. And that devotion does not make her untouchable, it makes her unmistakable. She is not easily fooled, not because she is cynical, but because she listens with her entire being. And when she listens, she does not just hear what is said, she hears what is meant, what is hidden, what is begging to be seen, and she offers no immediate answers, no rushed solutions. Just presence. And in that presence, people begin to hear their own souls again. That is her power, and it cannot be learned through noise, only through reverence, only through stillness, only through listening to the invisible. She does not seek to be understood in the way the world demands understanding. She no longer bends herself into the shape of clarity, just to comfort those who fear complexity. Her mystery is not a performance. It is a natural byproduct of integration, of uniting the seeming opposites within herself, without forcing them to resolve into something palatable. Jung called it the transcendent function, the alchemical bridge between the conscious and the unconscious that does not erase contradiction, but transforms it into something higher. And she lives there now, in that sacred tension, not seeking to choose between light and shadow, softness and strength, solitude and connection, but allowing all of them to exist within her without needing to compete. She has stopped asking the world for permission to be whole. The questions that used to haunt her, am I too much? Am I not enough? Have quieted into irrelevance, because the version of herself that once needed answers now bows to something greater, paradox. It is not confusion, it is wisdom without explanation. It is the silence between inhaling and exhaling, the moment when grief and gratitude touch and become one. She does not run from polarity, she holds it in her chest like a prayer. She knows that to ascend is not to transcend humanness, but to fully embrace it. She has cried in bathrooms and laughed in cemeteries. She has been both the wounded and the healer. She does not need to be defined to feel real, and that is why she is magnetic. She mirrors the parts of people they have disowned. She walks into a room and, without saying a word, reminds others of their own unresolved wholeness. Not to provoke, not to teach, just by being. Her synthesis is not rigid, it breathes, it evolves. Some days she is more water, some days she is more flame. She no longer fights to be consistent in the way others demand. She is coherent, not repetitive. And those who crave predictability may find her unsettling, even threatening, because she cannot be pinned. Her power is not in her ability to be decoded, but in her willingness to be authentic even when it makes others uncomfortable. The transcendent function is not a concept to her, it is a lived experience. The place she returns to when logic fails and intuition whispers. It is what allows her to hold grief and joy in the same breath, to say no with love, to say yes without losing herself, to walk away without bitterness, to stay without clinging. She is the union of opposites, not by denying the darkness, but by walking through it and discovering light that does not blind. People do not always understand her, but they feel her. They sense that she has gone somewhere deep and returned with something true, not an answer, not a doctrine, but a presence, a wholeness that does not need to convince or explain. She is not seeking peace outside herself anymore. She is the meeting place, the liminal space where every version of her is allowed to exist and be witnessed and be loved, and that kind of integration is not loud. It is not boastful. It is the quiet gravity that draws people in and makes them question why they ever thought they had to choose between this or that when maybe, just maybe, the real transformation was always waiting in the space between. They call her distant when she is simply discerning, cold when she is merely contained, arrogant when she is quietly anchored in her own worth, and strange when she simply refuses to perform. But she does not waste her breath correcting the stories people write about her. She understands projection like she understands the weather, something that happens around her, not because of her. People will always try to name what they cannot comprehend. They will call her mystery a mask, her solitude a wound, her clarity a threat. But she knows the difference between who she is and what others cannot yet face in themselves. She knows that when someone is unfamiliar with self-sovereignty, they will mistake it for hostility. When someone has never witnessed a woman who does not dilute herself to be palatable, they will brand her intimidating, unapproachable, too much, and still, she does not shrink. She does not hand over her complexity just to soothe someone else's insecurity. She knows that some people see the parts of her they are not ready to meet in their own reflection. They call her names because her existence disrupts their illusions. Her presence makes the unconscious conscious. Not because she forces it, but because she embodies something that cannot be faked self-possession without apology, and that can be confronting. To those who are still outsourcing their worth, she looks like rebellion. To those who are still addicted to validation, she looks like chaos. But to those who are doing their own shadow work, who have faced themselves in the dark and come back breathing, she is a sanctuary, a signal, a mirror. She does not try to be liked by everyone. She does not soften her truth to become more digestible. She does not play the role of the savior, the muse, the villain, the fantasy. She simply is, and that is radical. Because when a woman stops living through the gaze of others and starts moving from her own center, she becomes untouchable in a way that unnerves those who rely on performance to feel powerful. She does not need to be praised to feel seen. She does not need to be understood to feel valid. And she does not collapse when others reject her, because she no longer fears abandonment. She has sat in the echo of her own silence long enough to know that she is her own home. So when someone projects their wounds onto her, she watches. When they flinch at her joy or twist her peace into offense, she breathes. She does not retaliate. She does not explain. She does not dim. She simply holds her shape. Because she has done the work of untangling her identity from other people's comfort, she knows that clarity can feel like threat to someone who is used to manipulation. That boundaries can feel like betrayal to someone who is used to control. That mystery can feel like dishonesty to someone who equates transparency with trust. But that is not her burden to carry. She releases the need to be understood and replaces it with the devotion to stay true. Her radiance is not dependent on being received correctly. It is rooted in integrity. And no projection, no misunderstanding, no distortion can touch that. So she blesses those who misjudge her and continues walking her path. Not because she is unaffected, but because she has learned that staying aligned matters more than being accepted. And in that unwavering presence, in that refusal to contort herself for someone else's narrative, she becomes something rarely a woman who sees the storm of projection and chooses stillness anyway. She speaks in a way that silences rooms without raising her voice. Her language is not a rush to fill space or prove knowledge, but a deliberate transmission of meaning that asks to be felt rather than dissected. She does not speak to win or to impress or to correct misunderstandings that were never her responsibility to fix. Instead, she speaks in symbols. She speaks in the kind of phrases that echo later, hours or even days after they are spoken, like a bell that continues to hum in the bones long after the sound has stopped. Her words do not compete with the noise of the world. They rise above it by sinking beneath it. Like water finding its own level, her speech settles into places that logic cannot always reach. She has no need to argue because she has no need to dominate. She is not trying to be right. She is trying to be true. And truth, when spoken from that level of consciousness, needs no volume to land. She speaks in parables because she knows that truth does not live on the surface. It must be invited. It must be pursued. It must be felt. And so she does not explain herself to those who are not listening with more than their ears. She does not waste her energy flattening her soul into digestible pieces. She does not teach by lecturing. She teaches by being. Her voice carries a kind of encoded energy, something that moves beneath words and touches the part of people that remembers how to feel. Some will mistake this for avoidance. Others will call it vague. But the ones who have tasted silence, who have sat with mystery, who have stopped trying to decode everything into certainty, will recognize what she is doing. She is not trying to impress you. She is inviting you. She is giving you a doorway, not a map. She is offering you the chance to hear with your whole being. And that is unsettling to those who only know how to listen with their intellect. Her silence is not passive. It is precise. She withholds where others overshare, not to create distance, but to make space. She knows the difference between being loud and being clear, between being heard and being felt, and she chooses the latter every time. Her words are a kind of offering, never a weapon. She does not use them to control or to convince. She uses them to awaken. And once you have heard her speak that way, once you have been in the presence of someone who speaks from the soul instead of the script, you cannot forget it. It stays with you. It rearranges you. It softens your defenses and sharpens your awareness. You start to notice how noisy the world is, how desperate it is to be understood, and how rare it is to meet someone who is content to let truth unfold in its own time. She is not mysterious because she hides. She is mysterious because she honors the power of restraint. She trusts the silence between words. She lets her pauses speak, and in that quiet mastery, she becomes unforgettable. Because in a world addicted to more, she offers less, but what she gives is gold, and that gold does not tarnish. It deepens, it roots. It calls you back, again and again, to the place where presence lives. There is a quietness about her that does not feel empty but earned, the kind of stillness that follows a long night of weeping and the dawn that eventually breaks without being asked. She walks like someone who has buried versions of herself that once begged to be loved and resurrected the ones that needed no such permission. Her smile is not performative, it is permission-giving. Her gaze, when it meets yours, does not ask questions, yet somehow answers the ones you did not realize you were asking. There is a strange paradox in her energy, a flickering tension between grace and gravity, as though she holds the weight of what she has endured with such softness that it makes you want to whisper in her presence. You can sense she has suffered, but the suffering has been transmuted, not erased, not glossed over, but digested into something radiant. Her presence feels like a temple, sacred, open, and unshakable. People find themselves confessing things to her they swore they would keep hidden, not because she demands vulnerability, but because her very being says, "I know pain too, and I did not let it end me." She listens in a way that makes silence feel safe. She holds herself in a way that makes others remember how to breathe again. You can feel in her presence the 1,000 nights she laid awake unraveling lies told to her about who she was and who she could be. You can sense the moment she finally stopped asking the world to witness her becoming and chose to witness it herself. She has returned from emotional deaths that would have destroyed a lesser woman. And yet she does not carry bitterness, only boundaries. She does not wear the past like armor, but like skin, soft, real, and marked with the beauty of scars she no longer hides. There is no rush in her anymore, no desperate ache to arrive, to prove, to explain. Her energy does not perform, it emanates. It glows like something lit from within, because that is exactly what it is. She has made fire from the ashes of old selves. She has built altars where others built walls. She has become both the wound and the healer, the brokenness and the balm. Her laughter, when it comes, feels like a hymn, not because it is loud, but because it is holy. And her sadness, when it surfaces, does not destabilize but deepens the room. She no longer chases joy, she remembers it. She no longer avoids pain, she befriends it. She no longer needs to be understood, because she has finally understood herself. And that self is not fragile, that self is not for sale, that self has nothing to prove and everything to hold. There is something about her that makes people pause and wonder how she got like this. They do not know that what they are feeling is the presence of someone who has died 100 invisible deaths and chosen, each time, to rise softer instead of harder, to grow wiser instead of colder, to forgive without forgetting, to love without losing herself again. What they feel is the mystery of rebirth, the pulse of a woman who has walked through fire barefoot and came out not unburned, but illuminated. She is not afraid to start over, because she knows she is the one thing that never truly ends. That is what makes her presence unforgettable. She is the energy of someone who has returned to herself. And there is no force in the world more sacred than that. There is something rare about a woman who has nothing to prove, nothing to defend, and no hunger to be fully known by anyone who has not earned the privilege. She walks through the world with a kind of quiet resistance to the demand for full access. She does not explain the why behind her choices, nor does she soften the sharpness of her path just to make others comfortable with her direction. She does not give away her essence in exchange for being understood. She does not broadcast her healing process or offer her story up like a receipt for the depth she now carries. Her life is not a stage. Her soul is not an open gallery. What makes her addictive is not what she gives, but what she protects. She knows that to be fully seen by everyone is not intimacy, it is exposure. And she does not confuse vulnerability with lack of discernment. Her mystery is not performative, not curated for aesthetic, not crafted for intrigue. It is rooted in self-trust. It is born of having once overshared and found herself emptied by it. It is the fruit of having realized that not all closeness is connection, and not all attention is sacred. So she now guards what matters, not with fear, but with reverence. Her past, her visions, her pain, her prayers, they are not withheld in secrecy but preserved in sovereignty. The people around her may wonder what she is thinking or what she is feeling, because she no longer feels the need to over-translate her inner world for consumption. When she speaks, it is intentional. When she shares, it is sacred. When she reveals, it is never out of desperation. She lets the mystery remain, not because she is evasive, but because she is rooted. She knows that mystery is the soul's natural boundary, the way truth protects itself until the space is ready to receive it. Some will misread this as aloofness. Others will call her complicated. But those who have met themselves in the mirror of solitude will recognize her restraint for what it is: devotion to her own depth. She is not keeping people out. She is keeping herself whole. In a world that demands constant explanation and endless exposure, her refusal to overshare becomes magnetic, because there is something irresistible about a woman who does not leak. A woman whose silence does not beg to be broken. A woman who can sit with you in total presence and still hold something back, not out of fear, but out of knowing that real intimacy does not come from immediate access. It comes from mutual reverence. She is the kind of woman who teaches you that it is possible to be deeply connected and still deeply sovereign, that it is not cold to withhold, it is wise. That the most beautiful truths are often the ones that remain unspoken, glowing quietly beneath the surface of presence. Her mystery is not a mask, it is not a tactic. It is a living prayer, a subtle echo of all the nights she spent coming back to herself, choosing silence over validation, choosing solitude over false closeness, choosing essence over explanation. And in that choice, again and again, she becomes something unforgettable, not because she reveals everything, but because what she withholds holds weight. In her presence, you do not just feel seen, you feel summoned, not to take from her, but to return to the mystery within yourself, and that is the most sacred gift she gives. There is a difference between being cold and being consecrated, but most people do not know how to tell the difference because they have never met a woman who honors herself so deeply that her presence demands reverence. She does not snap or punish or build stone walls around her heart. She simply exists with such a quiet, grounded sense of worth that she no longer opens her gates to anyone who hasn't first learned how to approach with clean hands and honest eyes. She does not confuse being available with being loving. She does not water down her spirit to soothe the thirst of someone who never learned to hold water with respect. She has become the temple of her own being, and like all sacred places, entry is not denied, it is earned. Her boundaries are not weapons, they are invitations to rise. If you want to be close to her, you must remove your shoes, not because she is delicate, but because she is holy ground. She does not let just anyone sit beside her fire, not because she is elitist, but because she has been burned before and now tends to her flame with care. She is not guarded, she is graced. Her solitude is not emptiness, it is devotion. Her silence is not punishment, it is prayer. She has come to know that her energy is not something to be accessed by default, but something to be honored with intention. There are no tests to pass, no hoops to jump through, no puzzles to solve. There is only presence, respect, and reciprocity. And if you do not come with those, the door will not open. Not because she slammed it shut, but because you never knocked with your whole self. Those who mistake her for being cold do not understand the heat it takes to refine oneself into such clarity. They do not know the years she spent peeling away the false layers, grieving the versions of herself that once begged to be chosen, healing the places that once flinched at abandonment. She does not perform warmth to be liked. She does not offer hospitality out of obligation. She has nothing to prove, and because of that, her acceptance means more. Her yes carries weight. Her presence feels like home because she has made herself one. There is softness in her, but it is not for sale. There is kindness in her, but it does not erase her discernment. To be in her life is to be trusted with something sacred, and that trust is not given lightly. She does not make you feel small, she makes you remember how to stand tall. Because being near her reminds you what it feels like to be in the presence of someone who chose themselves, not just once, but over and over, until their spirit stopped asking for permission and started living as proof. If you have ever called her cold, perhaps it is because you approached her with noise instead of presence, with expectation instead of awe. But if you have met her with stillness, if you have honored her with truth, if you have offered your presence without a mask, then you know she is not cold at all. She is fire wrapped in silk. She is silence that heals. She is the sacred return to the self, and to stand with her is to remember that you, too, are holy. Most people leave behind conversations, memories, or even regrets, but she leaves something else entirely. She leaves behind an echo. Not a sound, not a word, not even a moment you can point to, but a frequency that lingers in the skin and under the ribs, long after her presence has gone quiet. You may forget the color of her dress, or the tone of her voice, You might not remember exactly what she said or how the conversation began. But what remains is the unmistakable sense that you stood in the presence of someone ancient, someone who had spent lifetimes collapsing into themselves only to rise whole again. Someone who didn't just look at you but looked through you, not to judge or conquer but to witness. Her gaze wasn't sharp, but it was surgical. It was the kind of attention that felt like stillness in a world trained on distraction. She made you want to slow down. She made you want to listen, not to her but to yourself. Because somehow, in her presence you remembered the sound of your own soul. She never told you what to believe, never tried to impress you with knowing. She simply sat there, still as a flame, eyes lit with something older than time, and suddenly everything false inside you felt too loud to hold on to. Her silence was not empty, it was full. Full of things she didn't need to say because she had already made peace with them. Full of stories she would never tell because they belonged to the earth, not to language. Full of truths too sacred for performance. She never tried to convert you to her way. She never asked you to match her depth. But somehow, you left wanting to be deeper, wanting to be quieter, wanting to stop abandoning yourself just to be understood. That is the power of a woman who has met her own soul. She does not try to be magnetic. She simply is. Because there is nothing more irresistible than someone who does not need you, yet sees you. Who does not chase love, but embodies it. Who does not offer herself as a prize, but as a presence. And when she leaves, whether for a moment or forever, you feel it in the marrow of your memory. Not as absence, but as invitation. To remember what it felt like to be near someone who demanded nothing from you but truth. Someone who had nothing to prove, and therefore proved everything. Someone who had already tasted the divine and knew better than to settle for noise dressed up as connection. You do not miss her in the way you miss people who filled space. You miss her like a prayer you forgot how to pray. Like a language you once spoke fluently in dreams. Like the sound of your own name before the world taught you to pronounce it with shame. Her mystery was not the point. Her soul was. But because she never needed to be seen, the glimpse you caught became unforgettable. And now, even in her absence, you carry her with you. Not her image, not her story, but her imprint. The echo of a woman who belonged to herself, who met the divine and came back glowing. Who saw you and walked away not to leave, but to remind you that the only person worth chasing is the one you become when you finally come home to your own soul.